بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليك يا حبيب الله صلى الله عليك يا مولاي وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله الحسين يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة غريب يا مظلوم كربلاء يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. For the love of Abi Abdullah al-Hussain, let's have a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of Abdullah al-Radi', let's have another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And lastly, for the love of Fatima alayha salam, let's have another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The word pandemic, as defined by the World Health Organization, is a disease that spreads from land to land worldwide, specifically across international borders. Right when that disease moves from one country to another, one enclosed country, one sovereign nation to another, it moves around the world and spreads, it's called a pandemic. If you hear the word pandemic, and I hear the word pandemic today in the demographic of today and what's going on today, the first thing that comes to your mind is coronavirus. But if you're a little bit more well-versed in history, and I say the word pandemic, and you want to strip away a little bit from the mainstream, you'll say maybe the polio epidemic, or the Black Death, for example. But if you know history very deeply, and I say, what's the worst pandemic to ever hit humans in human history? You'll tell me the Spanish flu, which not only killed hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions of people, up until some say 200 million people died of Spanish flu. But what if I told you, my brothers and sisters, the pandemic of today is the worst type of pandemic that human beings have ever witnessed and felt. It's not viral, nor is it bacterial, nor is it a disease that is autoimmune, where the body fights itself or attacks itself. Rather, it's spiritual. The pandemic of today, my brothers and sisters, is a silent killer. It kills when we don't know that it's killing. It destroys. We don't really know what's happening. And it's only when we die or close to death that we see the effects of that disease. Spiritual. What is that disease, my brothers and sisters? It's what we call tarkus salat, not praying. Something so simple, and that's why it's a silent killer. That's why it's a silent killer. Because we look down on it, and we don't think that it has the effects that it has. But the same way the people that didn't know what viruses were and how they worked back in Spain and other parts of the world, at the time of Spanish flu, they didn't know how things worked, and so they didn't mind getting into groups and not observing social distancing and other measures. And so 200 million people died. Similarly, in today's world, especially amongst the youth, the silent killers destroying left, right, and center, killing the hearts of the people in the community without them even knowing. And I'll tell you something, as a personal experience, and just in brackets, my brothers and sisters, I said this before, I'm going to say this again. You are all my brothers and sisters. I use my own personal experiences so that you can relate with me. From my own personal experience, I was very, very naive when I was young. In high school, I was a very naive person. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know how people used to look at religion. Me, myself, I was trying to find myself, I'll be honest. And I thought that most people prayed. Even those that are not too religious, at least salat is a red line. Yes? Until one day I sat with a friend of mine that plays on both sides of the field. He hangs out with religious people that go to the mosque, or at least people that go to the mosque. I don't want to say religious, but people that go to the mosque. They have some sort of religious identity. And he also hangs out with people that are not too religious. And I think we were talking about a prayer room or something, and I said, I wish there was a prayer room in school. I went to Kennedy. I wish there was a prayer room in school. He said, what? A prayer room? I said, yeah, I wish we had a prayer room in school. He said, and who's it for? I said, for the people in the school that pray. And he said, who prays at school? Not just who prays at school, as in who in school prays. You're pretty much either the only or maybe a few other people around you, maybe a group of 20 max that pray. And I looked at him and I was like, what? I didn't think it was to that point. It's a silent killer, my brothers and sisters, and it's the most dangerous killer. Do you know why? Because in today's demographic, it's not hitting the elders. It's hitting the youth, who are the future generation. And whenever a disease targets primarily the youth of the community, the future itself is at stake. One of the blessings of coronavirus, for example, is they say that it targets the elders of the community, those that have a weak immune system, they're immunocompromised. And usually youth have strong immune systems. So it's not detrimental for the future of the human race at the very least. But when you have a virus, a disease, a pandemic that targets the youth of a community, that's when the future of the community, the human race as a whole, in this case, is at stake. So tonight, my brothers and sisters, we want to talk about this disease, wal-'iyadh billah. We want to discuss it and ask a very simple question to start off. Simple question. Why is it happening? Why is this disease spreading? What is the cause? As in, if I choose not to pray, that's my choice. Why is it that my friends, those around me also, they choose not to pray as well? Why is this happening in the society that we live in? And by the way, this goes across the board, not just in the West. This is also in the East. It's a pandemic in the East as well. And back home, Iraq, Lebanon, you name it. And trust me, I've seen it. Why is this happening? We're going to answer this question and talk about this issue together, openly, with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Let's begin. Ask the question. Why is this happening? Why is this spreading? Why is this a phenomenon amongst our youth today, my brothers and sisters? To answer this question, we must look first and foremost how we understand and perceive. Whenever there's a social issue, don't go to the social issue itself. Don't go to the issue and tackle it head on. Try to understand the people that are involved in that social issue, and then you're going to understand why the issue is an issue in the first place, yes? So let's understand how the human being looks at the actions that they want to do during the day. Taib salat splits your day into 5 parts, whether they're equal or not, it's 5 parts. Subh, dhuhr, asr, maghrib, isha. So it has to do with a person's time, a human being's time. So let's see how the human being perceives time. How does a person perceive the time that they have during the day? Well, human beings, they look at time as this invaluable, priceless gem, whether you actually see it and say it like this or not. Subconsciously, we give value to time. Value that is not given even to the most precious of things that are material. Why? Because time you can't buy and sell. Time is limited. Your time And your time is limited, no matter if you're a prince or you're a beggar. Time for you and for you is limited. The prince, if they have 20 years on this earth, that 20 years is not going to be 20 years in a second, nor is it going to be 19 years and if the beggar has 85 years, that 85 will never be 86, nor will it be 84. Time is priceless. And when those that are on their deathbeds realize that they are going to die, they see the true meaning of this word called time, because they don't have it anymore. And that's how humans are. When we don't have the thing, we start to understand its value. And so when we look at this thing called time, we want to fill it. We want to fill it. We want to utilize it in the best possible manner. Whether that's studying or playing video games. A person studies because they feel that studying is something adequate for their time. Similarly, somebody that spends 8 hours on video games, we say it's a waste of time to them. No, this is something valuable for me and something that I should be spending my time on. We can disagree if that's true or not, no problem. But in the mind of the individual, that is something worth their time. Jamil, no problem. We move one step further. When a person doesn't pray, if I don't pray, I feel that my time during the day needs to be filled. And so I have an option. Either I fill that time with A or with B. When I choose B over A being salat, B being anything else, I chose B because I feel that it's worth the time. Meaning what? The main reason why the youth of the community today are not praying, it's not because they don't like something called salat. It's not because they have something against religion or salat as a thing, maybe. But for the most part, it's because of this thing we call istihqar as-salat. Belittling the salat. Belittling the value of the salat. Belittling the value of this thing that we do on a daily basis. Belittling its value and its meaning. And so you find, my brothers and sisters, those that don't pray, when you sit them down and say, "Tayyib khayyib, why?" When you go back and forth with them, and if you know how to get them to the source and where it stems from, you will 99% of the time come to a point where the only answer that they have is, I don't feel like it's as important as 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so you find my brothers and sisters that belittling the salat is the main reason why the people of the community don't pray. And this is beautifully explained by one of the Imams, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, I believe, where he says, the person who doesn't pray is lower in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the person that commits zina. Tayyib, why? Adultery. Tayyib, why? He says, because the person who commits adultery, that sin comes from an innate desire that they have. It stems from a desire that they have. They have something pushing them towards that sin, and that is the desire. As for the person who leaves the salat, it stems from them belittling what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made wajib for them. Someone seeing value in adultery and other things like adultery, whatever it may be, stealing, whatever, looking at something haram. Someone seeing value in that is very, very different than the person who sees the wajib of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as something not worth their time and not important. They're two very, very different people. One person is moving towards something wrong, while the other person is misunderstanding the very base of the religion itself. Misunderstanding the very base of the religion. On this, Allama Dastaghaib, in his book, Al-Dhunub al-Kabira, he explains, he says, As-Sa'im, the one who fasts, if they break their fast, they're supposed to be doing a wajib, but they broke the fast, so they left the wajib. When they break the fast, they did it because they were hungry, an innate desire. A person that steals, it's because they want that thing that they stole, also a desire that they have within. A person that wal'iyadh billah commits another act of sin, whatever it may be, it stems from something that pushes them towards that, except salat. It stems from istihqar, belittling the salat, my brothers and sisters. And when somebody belittles something that's actually important, where does that stem from? Yani right now, if I told you, outside there's this Ferrari, a beautiful Ferrari, costs $400,000. It's souped up to the max. Huh? And you went out there, looked at this Ferrari and said, it doesn't seem like it's worth much. Is it because the Ferrari is not worth much, or is it that you are ignorant of the value of that thing? Therefore, when someone belittles something that's actually valuable, that belittling is coming from what we call ignorance. Ignorance, al-jahl, not understanding, not having the knowledge. And when we began and we said that tarkus salat is a pandemic, that didn't just stem from Mullah Ahmad Bazzi trying to be poetic. No. That stemmed from the words of Imam Ali alayhi salam, where he says, al-jahl, ignorance, is the worst type of disease. The worst type of disease. Where he says, ignorance, not knowing, not understanding, is worse than a flesh-eating disease. Because it takes a person and throws them in a direction where they don't know where they're going, where they're misunderstanding everything around them, where they're living in an illusion. And something as valuable as salat is belittled. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Jameel. Now that we understand why this is happening, you have a question. And that is, Ahmad, then tell me, what is the value of the salat itself? Pay attention, my brothers and sisters. This is going to be the last majlis before the Ashr. So pay attention. What is the value of prayer in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Before I go to hadith, before I go to books, let's me and you speak logically. Our religion is very logical. Let's speak logically. When I go and I pray, what am I doing? I'm standing in front of this being called God. And I believe that this being called God created me, everything around me, created my past, my present, ultimately my future. In this being's hands is benefit and harm. Rather, the very meaning of worship, which is salat, is this act that a person does to a being in which they belittle themselves to that being, humiliate themselves, be humble in front of that being, with the belief that this being holds benefit and harm to them. Jameel, when I stand in front of God, I'm standing in front of the one that ultimately has benefit for me and pushes away what is harmful for me. And so the effect of standing in front of that being is to bring forth that benefit and push away that harm. Imagine I told you you have the ability to tap into a force in the universe that allows you to do everything that you've ever wanted to do and push away every sort of harm from you and those around you. You tell me, Ahmad, you're a millionaire and you wouldn't be sharing that information with me. I'll tell you, no problem. That ability, that potential is in each and every one of us sitting in this room. For when a person connects to the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's ultimately what they're bringing forth for themselves. And that's ultimately what they're doing. They're connecting with the force that is able to bring about all of the benefit and push away all of the harm. When we understand salat in this manner, which is quite selfish, but it's a good way to understand salat in the beginning, just in the first steps towards trying to better my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we understand salat in this way, it becomes clear why the riwayat, my brothers and sisters, say the person who leaves the salat, their punishment starts in the dunya. The effect, put aside the word punishment. There's this stigma around the word punishment. Put aside punishment. The ill effects of that action begin in the dunya before the akhirah. Before they go and pass on to the next world. And here I'm going to read you the hadith, as I like to read them from the sources. Look at this hadith. This hadith, my brothers and sisters, is in Falah as-Sa'il by Ibn Tawus. Look what the Prophet ﷺ says. He says, "Man tahawana bi salatih min ar-rijali wan-nisa." The one who belittles their salat from the men of the community or the women of the community. ابتلاه الله بخمسة عشر خصلة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inflicts this individual with 15 things. There are 15 effects to that action. Jameel. ست منها في دار الدنيا. 6 of them in the dunya. وثلاث عند موته. And 3 when that person is passing over to the next world. Death. وثلاث في قبره. And 3 in the grave. وثلاث يوم القيامة. And 3 on the day of judgment. 6 in the world, Ya Rasulullah. 3 at death, meaning how much in the actual world? This dunya. 9. 6 منها في دار الدنيا وثلاث عند موته وثلاث في قبره وثلاث. So in this world, 6 and 3, 9. 9 of them in this world alone. Jameel. Ya Rasulullah, what are these things? I'm not going to read the entire hadith, but I'm going to show you the effects in this world. Watch. فَأَمَّا اللَّوَاتِي تُصِيبُهُ فِي دَارِ الدُّنْيَا. As for the ones that come to this individual in the dunya, فَالْأُولَى يَرْفَعُ اللَّهُ الْبَرَكَةَ مِنْ عُمْرِهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes away the blessing from this person's age or from this person's life. There are people in this world that anytime they try and get somewhere, anytime they try to achieve something, they either are never able to achieve it, or if they achieve it, they don't feel fulfilled. They don't feel like what they achieved truly fulfilled them. That's because the blessing of the action of the person's life itself has been stripped away from them. Jameel. What else, Ya Rasulullah? وَيَمْحُ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلْ سِمَاءَ الصَّالِحِينَ مِنْ وَجْهِهِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes away the nur, the light of that person's face. SubhanAllah, there are people. They have nur in their face. When you look at them, you feel comfort. You feel this aura of majesty or spirituality. And then there are people that don't have this. That nur is taken away from that individual. وَكُلُّ عَمَلٍ يَعْمَلُهُ لَا يُؤْجَرُ عَلَيْهِ. As for the actions that they commit, they do in this world that are good, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have a reward for them in this dunya nor in the next. Because as you know, there's actions that you do in this world that give you fruit in this world before the akhirah. Fruit meaning a reward of some sort. This person doesn't have the ability to take that reward. وَلَا يَرْتَفِعْ دُعَاؤُهُ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ. And this is very important for our youth who are trying to strive to different goals, whether it's graduation, whether it's a job, whether it's this, it doesn't matter what it is. Always. Yeah, people say, Ahmad, I asked, but I didn't get. I turned to Allah, but He didn't respond to me. I spoke with an open heart, trusting in what He has, but He didn't respond. The Prophet says, the person who doesn't pray, one of the effects is that when they turn to Allah, Allah turns away. As in, the dua of that person is not listened to. It's not listened to. Some people say, well, Ahmad, that's a little too harsh. Well, think about it for a second. If I'm constantly disobeying, I'm constantly standing in front of Allah and saying, no, and I'm constantly ignoring God when He calls upon me, why do I expect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to answer me when I call upon Him? Why? Why is it that I lose hope when He doesn't answer me? But for the last 25 years of my life, me, Ahmad Bazzi, I wasn't looking towards Him, nor was I answering His call to me. Again, my brothers and sisters, our religion is very logical. 1 + 1 is going to always equal 2. It's not going to be a fairy tale. It's logic. Straightforward. Jameel. Keep going, Ya Rasulallah. وَالسَّادِسَةِ لَيْسَ لَهُ حَظٌّ فِي دُعَاءِ الصَّالِحِينَ. The last one is when the Salihin, Ahlul Bayt, the ulama, the people of righteousness pray for the ummah, the nation. This person is excluded from their dua. وَأَمَّا اللَّوَاتِي تُصِيبُهُ عَنْدَ مَوْتِهِ. As for the ones that come to him, the effects that come to this individual when they're about to pass over to the other world, death. فَأُولَاهُنْ أو فَأَوَّلُهُنْ أَنَّهُ يَمُوتْ ذَلِيلًا. The first one is they die a humiliating death. وَالثَّانِيَةِ يَمُوتُ جَائِعًا. Second is they pass away hungry. وَالثَّالِثَةِ يَمُوتُ عَطْشَانًا. They will die thirsty. فَلَوْ سُقِيَ مِنْ أَنْهَارِ الدُّنْيَا لَمْ يُرْوَ عَطَشُهُ. Even if they drank from the rivers, all of the rivers of the dunya, of this world, they will never feel like they've quenched their thirst. Never feel like they quenched their thirst. That's right when they pass. As for the other ones, I'm not going to read them. But if you want, you can find them. And I can give you the source, inshallah. I don't want to read them for many reasons. For time and other reasons as well. These are the effects. Ultimately, to my salat, there's an effect. Leaving the salat brings about a negative effect. Because salat is positive. Very logical, very straightforward and to the point. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. If I was wearing a mask, my salat would be similar to that. But let's have a loud salat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. طيب, what about the ahadith that speak about the importance of salat in itself? The value that it holds in itself. Then don't go far. Go to the ahadith that say, specifically hadith Imam al-Baqir, where he says, salat is like the pole of the tent. And me and you can understand the tent to be your life, to be who you are, your existence. Your existence, who you are, what you represent, your a'mal, your life. The salat is the pole in the middle of the tent. And at the ends of that tent, there are pegs in the ground. That one pole in the middle holds up the entire tent. But tip that pole over, what happens to the tent? It falls to the ground. And all of the other pegs have no meaning. Have no meaning. The salat is the pillar of a person's a'mal, a person's life. If it's accepted, if it's done, everything else is accepted. The other pegs, they have meaning. But if that one pole is gone, then the other pegs don't have meaning. The other a'mal are not accepted. It is the pole, my brothers and sisters, that holds up a person's a'mal, a person's value in this dunya. Similarly, we have ahadith that say, as-salat mi'rajul mu'min. The prayer is the ascension of the believer. What do we mean by ascension? It means a person is now able to tap into the spiritual aspect of their very human identity, or of the very human that they are, essentially. Because the human being, my brothers and sisters, what we see is the material side. But there's a spiritual aspect to the human being that we don't see, we don't understand, we don't comprehend. The way we charge that spiritual side, which is the side that should be attended to the most, rather the side that is more important, rather the bigger side of the human being, spiritual side. When a person tends to it, that's when they get to the potential that they have. And you can understand that ascension, my brothers and sisters, in terms of the true potential of the human being to be a spiritual being. The salat allows a person to ascend, spiritually. And that's why there are riwayat that say, either Amir al-Mu'mineen or Imam al-Hasan or both of them, when they were hurt in the battlefield, they were struck by an arrow. It said they went down and they began to pray. It was only when they began prayer that they were able to take out the arrow from their leg, from the leg of the Imam alayhi salam. Because they have ascended. They are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, my brothers and sisters, go to the words of Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, where he says, فَأَمَّا حَقُّ الصَّلَاةِ. As for the right of the salat has a right on you. Like, what is that right? فَأَن تَعْلَمَ أَنَّهَا وِفَادَةٌ إِلَى اللَّهِ. It's that you know that the salat is a means for you to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَنَّكَ فِيهَا قَائِمٌ بَيْنَ يَدَيِ اللَّهِ. And while you are in salat, you are standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِذَا عَلِمْتَ ذَلِكَ. If you understand that fully, كُنْتَ خَلِيقًا أَن تَقُومَ فِيهَا مَقَامَ الْعَبْدِ الذَّلِيلِ. Once you understand those two, then you yourself, by yourself, will stand a humble servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you understand those two things, again, it goes back to understanding. This is all dandy and nice. And I understand what you're saying. Ahmad, look, we know some of these riwayat and we've heard them many times over. I need motivation to pray. And that's not wrong. Many people just need motivation. That's all they need. They don't need anything more than just to be motivated to pray. Ahmad, tell me something that motivates me to pray. Want me to tell you something that motivates you to pray and me to pray, my brothers and sisters? Let me tell you the story of one of the ulama. The story is found in Kitab قصص وخواطر. قصص وخواطر من أخلاقيات العلماء. It said one of the scholars was in the prisons of Saddam. He was in the prisons of Saddam. And those that know. If you're in the prison of Saddam, it's not that you're just sitting in your cell. You're tortured day in and day out. He said, we were in the prison of Saddam. And amongst those that were with us were people that were outwardly fighting Saddam with weapons. So they were military men. And so the men inside the prison, the prisoners, they had a special type of punishment and torture for those two men. He said, they put us all in a room and they began torturing each and every one of us. They would hang us from the ceilings, they would hang us from the walls, and they would beat on us day and night. The whole day, all night, they would beat on us. One day, they were torturing us, and those two men were with us. They went to those two men. Wal-'iyadh billah. Their eyes, they took them out of their sockets. They left us on the ground, and back then, the prisons were made of sand. They were just sand and dirt on the ground. It wasn't like today. They left us on the grounds with the chains, with the blood. And those men had no eyes. That's it. Khalas, they're blind. He says we fell asleep on the sand, with the sand touching our wounds. We fell asleep. He said we woke up. And when we woke up, we looked and we said, it may be time for Fajr. So we prayed Fajr. And then we doubted if Salat al-Fajr actually began. So we prayed it again. This man and his friends, the whole night they were being tortured and beat. Two of his friends, he witnessed them. Their eyes were taken out of their sockets. But still woke for Salat al-Fajr and not prayed it once, prayed it twice because they thought that maybe it's not time. Maybe it's not time. These are the true scholars that stood for something and understood why they stood and what their stance was. What they were calling for was nothing more than Salat. Want me to tell you another one? Sayyid Abdul A'la Subzuwari, one of our greatest scholars to ever walk the earth. It said, Sayyid Abdul A'la, and this is found in the same book. Sayyid Abdul A'la Subzuwari. It said he was on his way to Hajj once. And on the way, the person driving, they took a wrong turn and they got lost in the desert. Until the car ran out of gas. Stopped in the middle of the desert. Imagine Iraq to Saudi. Stopped in the middle of the desert. Wasn't moving. Everyone got out of their cars. They had some food, some water. The sun of the desert, they drank their water. There's no more water left. He said, time passed. We didn't know what to do. We were waiting. Maybe somebody comes by. This is the middle of the desert. We're not in Canada. It's the middle of the desert. No one's going to come by. He says, until I saw the people laying on the ground and just waiting for death to come. Sayyid Abdul Ala, he said, what I did was I got up and I went to a corner by myself. He understood that in time of tragedy, in time of intense pain and hardship, the human being doesn't go to other human beings. The human being goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, I went aside and I began to pray Salat Ja'far al-Tayyar. Salat Ja'far al-Tayyar is 2 rak'at, but it takes long to pray. He said, I was praying Salat Ja'far al-Tayyar until all of a sudden one of my friends runs and he calls me, Sayyidna, let's go. What do you mean, let's go? I went to the car or the bus. I found everyone waiting for me in the bus. I went to them and said, what's going on? One of them, and this is a story that Sayyid Abdul Ala himself he narrates. This is not just a fairy tale. One of the men, he says, when we were waiting, a beautiful man showed up. He came to us. He gave us water. He told the man that's driving the bus driver, turn on the car. He turned on the car and it started. And he said, Mecca is that way. Oh, and by the way, before you leave, send my salam to Sayyid Abdul A'la Subsuwari. And he walked off and we didn't see him ever again. Everyone lost hope. Sayyid Abdul A'la went to the meaning of hope, the source of hope. Do you want motivation to pray? You want motivation? I want motivation to pray. Then understand that salat is your hope. Salat is your hope in this world. If you leave it, if I leave it, there's no more hope for me in this world or the next. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And these words, my brothers and sisters, are not there for us to make, for us to feel like this is hopeless. No. These words are not to make us feel hope. This is to make us feel motivated that we have something so special that we're letting go. This is Ashura, and this is where the revolution begins. The revolution against the oppressor, but also the revolution internally. Let me change one thing about myself. Ahmad Bazzi has to change one thing about himself. I have many flaws. We all have flaws. The person who thinks that they don't have a flaw, that itself is the biggest flaw to have. We're humans. We have flaws. I have a flaw. We all have flaws. Everyone has a flaw. We all have something to fix. I'm going to choose one thing, and you're going to choose something. If you don't pray, if I don't pray, let me choose that one. Do you know why? Let me choose that one. But do you know why that one specifically? Person can have a lot of obligations that they leave. But do you know why salat specifically? And why I'm saying this on the night of the Ashir? Imam al-Hussain now is getting ready to die. Like, that's the reality. Imam al-Hussain now is literally getting ready to die. But do you know why salat, I picked it for tonight? Because Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam on the day of Ashura, rather the night of Ashura, asked for one more day. And you know what they did in that day? The riwayat say, from the tents of Imam al-Hussain and his companions, we heard a buzzing sound, like the buzzing of the bees. Prayer, Quran, ibadah, on the night of the Ashir al-Muharram. He asked for one more night. One more night. On the day of Ashura, when the battlefield was full of blood, the men were dying left, right, and center in front of Imam al-Hussain. And who are those men? His best friends. Imagine your best friend slaughtered in front of you. It said, Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam, he's sitting, or he's on the battlefield. He's seeing his friends die. One of his companions, he looks up and he says, his name is Abu Thumam al-Ansari. He says, Ya Hussain, I know I'm going to meet my Lord, but I want to meet my Lord having prayed al-Dhuhr. Imam Hussain looks up at the sky and says, ذكرت الصلاة جعلك الله من المصلين. You reminded us of salat, or you spoke of salat. May Allah make you from those who pray. Let's get up and pray. Tell them to stop fighting for us just to pray. It said Al-Hussain, one of the men on the other end, he says, and it's not going to be accepted. Habib ibn Mudahir responds to him, no problem. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam now has a choice. I have a choice, you have a choice. Imam al-Hussain had a choice. He has a choice. Either I defend or I pray. And if I pray, they're going to shoot me with arrows. They're going to attack. Do you know what the Imam alayhi salam did? He made a choice. He said, no, I'll rather pray. Then how are you going to defend them, Ya Aba Abdullah? How are you going to defend yourself and those praying? I'm going to put two of my most trusted men to protect me as I pray. Protect you from what, Ya Hussein? They're going to come in with the swords and try to attack you with swords? No. He knew that the men were going to shoot arrows. Yet he put two of his most trusted, or some of the more trusted companions, the good companions, the men that Imam al-Hussein knew if the arrow was coming to Hussein, he would accept that arrow with his chest. Those men, he put them in front of him and he said, Allahu Akbar. When the arrow would come at Hussein ibn Ali, that man would jump in front of the arrow. He wouldn't just stand still and close his eyes. He would jump in front of the arrow. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam had how many companions? With his family and his companions, maybe 72? Let's just say he had 72 companions. Outside of the family members. He had a limited number of men to defend what? To defend his woman, his honor. And you know what he did with two of those men? He protected Salat. He protected Salat with two of those men, my brothers and sisters. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam on the day of Ashura, do you know why he stood? He stood for Salat. He stood for Allahu Akbar at 5 a.m. in the morning. That's what he stood for. We want to change. We want to revolt. Revolt with this, my brothers and sisters. Let me revolt with this. Tomorrow's the Ashir of Muharram. Let me get up for Fajr. If I got up for Fajr on the Ashir of Muharram, then I've begun my revolution. I've begun my revolution. That is what Al-Hussain alayhi salam was calling for. And they threw arrows at the Imam. And those two men died. And you're going to hear tomorrow what they said to Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam as they were dying. Subhanallah. Even Salat, they had no respect for the people of Yazid, people of Ubaydullah bin Ziyad. They had no respect for even Salat. But what am I to expect from a people that have no respect for women, have no respect for children, have no respect even for a 6-month-old child, the child that we are here to commemorate, Abdullah al-Radiya. The child that hurt no one, the child that had no sword, the child that couldn't fend for himself, the child that didn't threaten anyone and didn't actually hold any sort of value whatsoever other than the fact that he needs someone to care for him. Other than that, the value in terms of his ability to change something, nothing. Value in that sense, in that context. Absolutely not. Yet he was killed. He was slaughtered, my brothers and sisters. What am I to expect of people of that? They have no problem killing Salat as it prayed. Al-Hussain as he prayed. He was Salat, praying. They had no problem killing Hussain ibn Ali alayhi salam. Naam. You tell me, 6-month-old child. Tell you, 6-month-old child, they killed him. You tell me, how did they kill him? What happened? Why did they kill him? I tell you, it was right after Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam was killed. When there was nothing left, and no one left, essentially. There was no more water. There was no way for Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam to get water for his family, other than him going down to the battlefield. So Imam Hussain alayhi salam got himself ready. He was trying to get himself ready. All of a sudden, someone comes to him. Someone comes to him holding something. It was none other than Zainab alayha salam. She comes to Imam al-Hussein. In her hand she held Abdullah al-Radhi, who was only 6 months old. The baby was crying from thirst, and his mother wasn't able to feed him anymore. This is the ultimate tragedy, my brothers and sisters. Zainab alayhi salam cried and said, Akhi, Akhi, khudh tuflak. Brother, take your child. He put him on his lap and kissed him, bidding him farewell, saying to him, بعداً لهؤلاء القوم إذا كان جدك المصطفى خصمه. Away with these people when your grandfather Rasulullah will be their opponent on the day of judgment. The Imam alayhi salam had hope in his heart. Rather, he knew Ar-Rabab alayhi salam, she had hope in her heart. Sukaina had hope in her heart that this young child will make the man rethink, will make the man say that this is a young boy. He didn't do anything to anyone. Let's give the boy some water. They had that hope. The Imam alayhi salam picked up the boy and took him to the Euphrates River. He presented the boy to the man. He held him up and said, "O people, you've killed my brothers, my children, and my supporters. No one has remained for me other than this child. He's burning from thirst, and he has done nothing. He has done nothing to you to deserve this. Give him some water." The people divided. Some wanted to give the child some water, while others said, "Kill everyone from this family." Umar ibn Sa'd, he turned to Harmala and said to him, وَيْلَكَ يَا حَرْمَلَةَ اقْطَعْ نِزَاعَ الْقَوْمِ. Harmala, stop this arguing amongst the people. Stop this arguing amongst my army. So Harmala said, فَمَا أَصْنَعُ. What do you want me to do? So he says, Umar ibn Sa'd said to me, shoot the baby with an arrow. He took the arrow. He says, I put an arrow in my bow. I aimed it at the child. I was looking for a place to shoot the child. Now let's stop here. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam is still holding his young baby, huh? He's seeing the men speak to each other. If you were on the plains of Ashura, you see a man holding his child to the sky, asking for water from a river. If they took all the water they wanted, the river would not go dry, huh? You see this man holding this baby to the sky and saying, give my child some water. Men on the other side arguing amongst themselves and speaking. You say, maybe they're saying, let's give this child some water. Maybe they're discussing how to bring the water to Hussein, so Hussein himself wouldn't use that water for himself. But all of a sudden, a breeze blew over the plains of Karbala, and a cloth that was covering Abdullah al-Radhi' falls from its spot. And you're watching this. He says, I saw the neck of the baby shine like a silver pot. I aimed my bow and let the arrow leave my bow. It flew through the air, and as you watch, it pierced the neck of the baby and came out from the other side. When Harmala shot the baby, Abdullah felt the pain of the arrow. He took his hands out of his cloth and he hugged the Imam's neck. He began shivering like a slaughtered bird. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam filled his hands with the blood of Abdullah. He threw it to the sky. Imam al-Baqir says, not a single drop of blood came down from the sky. Then the Imam says, هَوَّنَ مَا نَزَلَ بِي أَنَّهُ بِعَيْنِ اللَّهِ. What made this easy is that what has befallen me is in the eyes of Allah. The Imam heard someone from the sky sing a voice, say, leave him, O Hussein, for he has a nurse in heaven. Now Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is holding this child. He has to come back to the camp and present this child to his mother. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam walks towards the camp. Who meets him first? The same one that met him after Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas was killed. None other than Sukaina. She says to him, Aba ya Hussein, لعلك سقيت أخي الماء وجئتنا بالبقية. Father Hussein, maybe you brought some water for my brother, gave him some water to drink, and brought us some of the leftovers. He turned to her crying, saying, Bunayya, Bunayya, khudhi akhaki. خذي أخاك مذبوحا من الوريد إلى الوريد. Daughter, take your brother slaughtered from one side to the other. She screamed, Wa Abdullah. Then his mother came and she saw the baby slaughtered like a bird. She screamed, Wa walada, Wa Abdullah. As for the women, when they saw Abdullah covered in blood, slaughtered, they screamed all for him. Kulthum brought the baby to her chest. She put her neck on his neck. Her eyes flowed with tears. She shouted, Wa Muhammada, Wa Aliya, Mada laqina ba'dakuma min al-a'da. Oh Muhammad, oh Ali, what have we seen from the armies after you? لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. This is the last night, my brothers and sisters. This is the last night of Abi Abdullah. So we speak to this night. And we say, O night, prolong your hours. O night, prolong your darkness. Give us some time with Abi Abdullah al-Hussein. So we say to the night, Ya Layl, طاوين ساعتك. يا ليل احمل آهاتك. يا ليل طول ساعاتك. يا ليل احمل آهاتك. لو ودعت الوينيان تنت وألاني العدوان. لو ودعت الوينيان تنت وألاني العدوان. طول يا ليل الوداع إيش ما تطول وياك ساهر، ما أميل من البوانشي حتى لو تعمل نواظر. حسين بس هالليلة يمي وما تشوف عيوني باكر، صدقني يا ليل القهار، يا ريتك تطول دهار. خايفة من أشباح القدر وخاف ضل مكسورة خاطر. يا ليل ارحم دلالي، يا ليل ضاعت امالي، يا ليل ارحم دلالي، يا ليل ضاعت امالي. اي دهري الخوان تتولاني العدوان، يا ليل طول ساعاتك، يا ليل احمل آهاتك، يا ليل طول ساعاتك، يا ليل احمل آهاتك. لو ودعت الوليان تتولاني العدوان. أنا يا ليل العقيلة زينب المعروف خدري، طولي ما واحد الشافة ولا ستير يوصل الستر. لكن يا ليل شبدية سلميت للقدر أمري، دمعاتي يبسن بالجفين من يطور مصباح الحزين. بطفال وبعيل امتحين والله ما ينحمل صبري. يا ليل كافي تروعني، يا ليل صبحك يفجعني، يا ليل كافي تروعني، يا ليل صبحك يفجعني. لو نزلوا للميدان تتولاني العدوان. Let's say it together. Those who know it, I know all of you know it. Let's say it all together. يا ليل طول ساعاتك، يا ليل احمل آهاتك، يا ليل طول ساعاتك، يا ليل احمل آهاتك. لو تتولى عن العدوان لو ودعت للوليان تتولى عن العدوان يا الله. We ask you, Ya Allah, by the right of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, accept this majlis from us, Ya Allah. Accept our amal, Ya Allah. Accept our salat, Ya Allah. If we don't pray, Ya Allah, allow us to begin and never stop till the day we die, Ya Allah. Make us from the supporters of Abi Abdullah al-Hussain. Make us from the supporters of Abdullah al-Radhi'. And allow us to stand for what Imam al-Hussain was calling for on the day of Ashura. Make us from the supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us from those who stand for what Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman stands for. And allow us to call for what Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman calls for, Ya Rabb al-Alameen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma kun liwalika al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan salawatuka alayhi wa ala abaihi fi hadhihi as-sa'a, all of us, wa fi kulli sa'a وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا بحق محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد. Let's recite Surah Al-Mubarakah Al-Fatiha للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والشهداء والعلماء before it aloud. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.